Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. Looks like the Doctor had some timey-wimey trouble and ended up on the wrong plane, so let's see how their cards perform in this game. First up is Cody, on the Dalek Emperor. Cody built this deck to be a Dalek typal deck, and wants to combine this with some token synergies to drain out his opponents. Up next is Sam, who built the Face of Bo. Sam is playing all of the big, impactful suspend cards, and wants to cheat them out using the Face of Bo's ability. Our third player today is Chandler on Ashad, the lone Cyberman. Described as a Grixis artifact value deck, he wants to sacrifice creatures to the casualty ability to flood the board with impactful artifacts. Our last player today is Caden, who brought the 13th Doctor with Yasmin Khan as a partner. Caden's deck just wants to cast cards from anywhere that's not his hand, like cascading. And he also just gets to play some big team or haymakers too. We're about to get into that game, but before that, please give us a like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell too. We have links to our socials, public Discord server, Decklists, and Patreon in the description. Our channel is partnered with Dragon Shield, so if you're looking to pick up any new sleeves or magic-related products, check out our affiliate link in the description. Now, let's get to that gameplay.
Chandler wins the die roll and he plays Shipwrecked March and passes to Caden. Caden starts off with a mountain, and then he'll cast Ragavan and pass to Cody. Cody plays Bloodstained Mire and passes. Sam starts off with Training Center, and he'll suspend Soul Talisman, and then he passes to Chandler. And Chandler will play a swamp, and then cast Arcane Signet, and then he passes to Caden. And Caden starts off by moving to combat and hitting Cody for 2. Upon connecting, he'll make a treasure, and Cody exiles Metallic Mimic. Caden then plays Trenzalore Clock Tower, and then he'll tap for 2 and cast Metallic Mimic, and he chooses Time Lord as the creature type. The turn is then passed to Cody, and he plays a mountain, then he'll fetch with his Bloodstained Mire for a Badlands. He then casts a Talisman of Indulgence, and then he'll tap it for a black to cast Changeling Outcast. Then the turn is passed to Sam, and he starts off with a basic Plains as land for turn. Then he suspends Duskrider Peregrine, and then he'll pass the turn to Chandler. Chandler plays another swamp, then he'll cast a Baleful Strix and draw upon ETB, then cast the card he drew, which is Soul Ring, and then he passes the turn to Caden. He'll start off with a basic Forest, then he'll cast a Ledger Shredder, and then he'll move to combat. He attacks Sam for 4, and when Ragavan connects, he'll make another treasure, and Sam exiles Eorith of the Healing House, and Caden will cast it. Ledger Shredder will connive, and he discards non-land, so it gets a counter, and then the turn is passed to Cody. He starts off with a basic mountain, then he'll cast Bloodline Pretender, and he'll choose Dalek when it enters the battlefield. Then the turn is passed to Sam, and he'll play an Otawara as land for turn, then he'll play an Arcane Signet, then the turn is passed to Chandler, and he'll start off by casting Razorlast Transmigrant. Chandler then has to run off for a second, and Cameron takes over for the rest of the turn. Cameron plays Tap Sulphur Falls and passes the turn. Now on Caden's turn, he'll start off with a City of Brass, then he'll move to combat, and he'll swing for 2 at Cody in the air and 4 at Sam on the ground. And upon connecting with Sam, he makes another treasure, and Sam exiles Mox Tantalite, which can't be cast since it doesn't have a mana cost other than its suspend. Then post-combat, Caden casts the 13th Doctor, and then he'll activate Eorith to untap Ragavan, and then he moves to his end step, and his Ledger Shredder will untap because it has a counter on it. Also, the 13th Doctor will enter with a 1/1 counter. Caden just needs to find a dice. The turn is then passed to Cody, and he'll start off with a basic swamp, then he taps for 5 and casts the Dalek Emperor. Missed Bloodline Pretender trigger. He'll then move to combat, and each opponent faces a villainous choice. Sam has no creatures, so he can't sacrifice anything. Chandler/Cameron sacrifices the Transmigrant, and Caden sacrifices the Metallic Mimic, so Cody makes a 1/3/3 Dalek with Menace. And Bloodline Pretender gets a counter. Cody then moves to combat and hits Caden for 1 unblockable. Then he'll swing 3 at both Chandler and Sam, and they both just take it. He'll then pass the turn to Sam, who starts off with a Ganjo as land for turn. Oh yeah, and Soul Talisman comes off suspend. Sam will then cast the Face of Bo, and then he'll cast a Spell Seeker. Caden connives and discards a land. The Seeker resolves, and Sam tutors Ancestral Vision to his hands. The turn is then passed to now Chandler, and he'll start off with a Sunken Hollow. Then he'll cast Canoptic Spider, and then the turn is passed to Caden. He will start his turn off by Shocking and Stomping Grounds, and then he'll cast Expressive Iteration. He'll look at the top 3 cards of his library, put 1 into his hand, exile a Soul Ring, and then he'll put the other on the bottom of his library. He'll then just cast the Soul Ring. This will trigger the 13th Doctor, and he puts a counter on Ragavan. It also triggers the Ledger Shredder, and he connives and discards the land. After this, he moves to combat, hits Sam for 2 in the air, and then he passes the turn, and his Ledger Shredder untaps on end step. Now on Cody's turn, he starts off with an Arid Mesa as land for turn, and then he'll fetch with it for an untapped Blood Crypt. After this, Cody will tap for 2 and sacrifice Changeling Outcast for a Diabolic Intent, tutoring a card to his hand. Cody will then move to combat, and we have some villainous choices. Sam will sacrifice his Spellseeker, Chandler gives him another Dalek, and Caden will sacrifice Eorith. This gets Bloodline Pretender 1 more counter. Cody then moves to combat, and he swings his 4/4 Bloodline Pretender at Caden, and a 3/3 Dalek at Sam, and they both just have to take it. Pose combat, Cody casts Exterminate. He'll replicate it twice by tapping his Emperor and his token. He'll target Canoptic Spider, Ledger Shredder, and Ragavan. Caden also has a Connive trigger, and Caden will also respond to all of this by casting Chaos Warp, and he targets Ragavan. He hits a basic forest off of it, so it goes to the battlefield. The Connive trigger is forgotten, and then Chandler and Caden both lose 3 life. Cody will then pass the turn, and Sam gets a Duskrider Peregrine off Suspend. He'll then play a basic mount as land for turn, then activate the Face of Bow and cast an Ancestral Vision, drawing 3 cards. He'll then tap for 3 and cast 4 Nox, and then the turn is passed to Chandler. He'll start off with Drowned Catacombs as land for turn, and then he'll cast his commander, Ashad the Lone Cyberman. Chandler will then tap for 5 and cast Dalek Drone. When it ETBs, he blows up the Dalek Emperor, and Cody will lose 3 life. And then the turn is passed to Caden. And he starts off with a Frontier Bivouac as land for turn. Then he'll tap for 3 and cast Eternal Witness, returning Chaos Warp back to his hand. Then he'll cast Yasmin Khan, and then he passes the turn to Cody, who plays a basic swamp, and then he'll just pass the turn to Sam. On upkeep, 4 Nox loses a counter, and then he'll draw an extra card on first main. He'll play a Fabled Passage as land for turn, and then he'll cast Rose Tyler. After this, he activates Face of Bow, and then he'll pay 1 for a Heroes Remembered, and gain 20 life. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he'll start off by swinging 3 Menace in the air at Sam, and he has to just take it. Then he'll cast a Foundry Inspector, and he will casualty to it with the Dalek Drone, so he'll get an extra copy of it, and his commander gets a counter. Then Chandler will just pass the turn to Caden, and he'll start by activating Yasmin to exile Incubation Druid. He'll then cast Chandra Torch of Defiance, and he'll plus her, and the exiled card is Fathom Mage, and he will cast it from exile. When he casts it, 13th Doctor triggers, and he puts a counter on Yasmin. Caden then moves to end step, and he untaps Yasmin, and then the turn is Cody's. Or is it? Cody stays on end step and casts Stinging Study. He'll then move to his turn and play an Exotic Orchard. He'll then tap for 3 and cast Bedevil, targeting Chandra, and she is destroyed. After this, he'll cast a Grave Shifter, and when it ETBs, he'll return Metallic Mimic to his hand. And his Bloodline Pretender will also get a counter. Cody will then pass the turn and discard Confession Dial on Cleanup. Now on Sam's turn, 4 Nox does its thing, and then he'll cast Freed from the Real on Face of Bow. Sam will then activate the face, and the spell he casts is Restore Balance. And you may be thinking, it's not that bad on this board, but Chandler only has 1 card in hand, so now everyone else has to discard down. Yeah, so everyone goes down to 7 lands, 3 creatures, and 1 card in hand.
Discarding Metallic Mimic, Mirkwood Bats, Mountain Warspite Changeling, Tari Mauler, and Curse Mirror.
Not discarding because I have 1 card in hand.
Blasphemous Act, Mystic Sanctuary, and Island.
Tinkali Hunter, the 12th Doctor, Tali, Wildly Sorcerers.
Sam then hits Cody in the air for 3, and then he'll pay 1 blue to untap Face of Bow, then he'll pass the turn. On end step, Chandler will pay 2 black, and return Razor Lash Transmogrant to the battlefield. Now on his turn, Chandler will just cast Silas Wren, play an island, and then pass the turn to Caden. And the first thing he does is activate Yasmin, and he exiles a Questing Druid. Caden will then tap for 3 and Chaos Warp the Face of Bow. It resolves, and there's a generous gift on the top of Sam's library. So, it stays there, and Caden will play a Wooded Foothills as land for turn. He'll then send his Questing Druid on an adventure, and he exiles a Forest and Animar. And the 13th Doctor will trigger, so he puts a counter on Fathom Mage and draws a card. He'll then cast Animar, and there's another 13th Doctor trigger. And of course the counter goes on Fathom Mage. The turn is then passed to Cody. He'll start by tapping for 5 and casting Patriarch's Bidding, and he obviously chooses Dalek. Sam decides to crack his Fabled Passage for Plains and path the 13th Doctor, and everything of that chosen type is returned to the battlefield, so Chandler actually gets his Dalek drone back. And since he's non-active player, his trigger resolves first, so he blows up Cody's Taurian Mauler. And Cody's Bloodline Pretender gets a whopping 3 more counters from this. He'll then pass the turn to Sam, Vanishing and Extra Draw shenanigans. He'll then cast Patriarch's Seal, and then he recasts the Face of Bow and passes to Chandler. Chandler starts off by paying 3 to cycle Xander's Lounge. Chandler then casts a free Cybermen patrol, and he sacrifices his Dalek drone to casualty it. Chandler then moves to combat, and he swings for 6 at Sam, and 2 of it is Silas Wren, so when Sam takes all 6 damage, he'll return Canoptic Spider to his hand, and then post-combat, he'll tap for 5 and cast it. Chandler then passes the turn, and on end step, Caden activates Trenzalore Clock Tower to put a time counter on it. Then he'll activate Yasmin and exile Lier, and he can cast that till the end of the next end step. Now on his turn, he'll start off with a Misty Rainforest, and he'll immediately fetch with it. And it finds a basic island to the battlefield. He'll then activate Yasmin again and find Search for Tomorrow. Then he'll recast the 13th Doctor. Animar will trigger, getting its first counter, and then he casts Questing Druid from its adventure. Counter triggers all around, and Fathom Mage gets the 13th Doctors. He then casts Lier, more triggers, Caden then moves to combat, and Animar goes at Sam, who can't block it, so he just has to take 4. Caden will then pass the turn, and all of his creatures with counters untap. Now on Cody's turn, he starts off by recasting the Dalek Emperor. Bloodline Pretender gets a counter, and then he moves to combat. Villainous choices all around. Sam and Caden give him a Dalek, and Chandler sacrifices his Graveyard Recursion Boy. More Bloodline Pretender triggers. He then moves to attackers, and hits Chandler with the Changeling Outcast, then swings his Warspike Changeling, his 3/3/3s with Menace, and his 12/12 Bloodline Pretender at Sam. Before blocks, Chandler brings back his Transmogrant that can't block because he thinks it's funny. Also, the Changeling just can't be blocked, so he takes the 1. Rose Tyler is put under the 12/12, and then the Face of Bo will bounce off the Warspike Changeling, and then Sam takes 9. Cody then passes the turn after combat, and on Sam's upkeep, Fornox vanishes. Then, on Sam's first main phase, he'll tap for 5 and overload Vandal Blast. Cody and Chandler are screwed, and Cody forgets to remove his Talisman. After this resolves, Sam will activate the Face of Bo and cast a Gargadon. After this, the turn is passed to Chandler, and he'll just recast Ashad, and then he'll pass the turn to Caden. Caden stops on end step to activate Yasmin and exile a forest. Then on his turn, he'll play and fetch with a Scalding Tarn, and he finds a mountain with it. He then activates Yasmin again, which finds him a Cultivate, and then he'll hardcast an Apex of Power. It resolves, and he exiles Atali, 3 Visits, Elvish Mystic, Training Center, Creative Technique, Exotic Orchard, and the Flux. And then he adds 10 red mana to his mana pool. And so he starts casting things, starting with Atali. It only costs 4 mana thanks to Animar. And so Caden will cast Biotransference off of Chandler, a Soul Ring off Sam, and a Karen Wanderer off Cody. Oh yeah, and a Sword of Fortune Frontier from himself. So yeah, he just gets to cast all of these. Caden will then cast the Creative Technique, demonstrating targeting Chandler, and Chandler will hit a Laser Screwdriver. Off Caden's 2 copies, he hits a Birds of Paradise, and a Felwar Stone Biotransference trigger. And from all this, Caden should have gotten a total of 8 13th Doctor triggers, and 1 Animar trigger. He forgets the Animar trigger, and miscounts and says he gets 6 13th Doctor triggers, but he still distributes those 6 counters. Oh yeah, and there should have been a bunch of Questing Druid triggers too, but this is a really complex board today, so I don't blame him here. Anyways, after this, Caden will equip Sword of Fortune Frontier to Animar. Chandler will respond by activating Laser Screwdriver to tap the sword. Caden will then move to combat, and he swings at Animar and Lier at Chandler for a total of 13, and Chandler will just take it, and then he'll swing Questing Druid and Fathom Mage at Cody. Cody will chump the Fathom Mage and then take 3. His sword will trigger, and they're both non-lands, and he's tapped out, so those just stay exiled. And then he'll pass the turn, and all his creatures with counters untap. On Cody's turn, he plays and fetches with a Scalding Tarn, recasts the Dalek Emperor, and then goes to combat. Villainous choice, everyone gives him a Dalek. He'll then move to combat, and he swings 4 at Chandler, and 9 Menace at Sam. Chandler takes the 4, and Sam will double block one of the 3/3s and take 6. And then the turn is passed to Sam. He'll just play a Scalding Tarn and pass the turn to Chandler. Chandler starts his turn off by returning his Transmogrant to the battlefield, and then he'll cast a Steel Overseer and casualty the Transmogrant away, and this gets a shot a counter. Chandler then passes the turn, and on end step, Caden will activate Yasmin and exile an Elusive Otter. He'll then do it again on his turn, and this time it's Cyclonic Rift. And on a board state like this, of course Caden overloads it. Nobody has any blockers anymore. Chandler will respond to it though by activating his Laser Screwdriver and goading Atali. And Fathom Mage gets the 1/1 counter. Caden will then move to combat, and he swings Atali, Fathom Mage, and Animar at Sam, which is more than enough. Then he'll swing the 13th Doctor at Chandler for 2, and then everything else at Cody, which is 12. And there are no responses at the table, so everyone is dead except for Chandler and Caden. Post-combat, Caden casts a Burgi, God of Storytelling, and then passes the turn to Chandler, who top decks absolutely nothing, and he will concede on the spot to Caden, making him the winner. Congratulations. Well everyone, there you have it. That was a really fun game. Everybody got to do a lot of stuff, and in the end, the Doctor even won. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and let us know down in the comments below. While you're down there, check out all of our links. There's a lot of cool goodies and fun down there. But anyways, that's all for today. I hope you all have a smooth day.